Capitalist cities grew from the market. They were built for profit, for consumption, for a spectacle. But what if a city could be built for equality instead? In the 20th century, socialism and communism rose as rival ideologies, promising not just new economies, but new kinds of cities. But here's the catch. The cities that called themselves communist were never truly communist. They were still socialist experiments, real laboratories for what a collective urban future could be. In Marx's theory, socialism was a transition stage, a world where the state managed production on behalf of the people, moving toward the stateless communist future. In reality, the built environment stopped at the first stage. From Moscow's monumental avenues to Beijing's Danwei compounds, from Havana to Pyongyang, socialist regimes imagined cities that would reflect solidarity, equality, and collective life. But these designs also carried their own contradictions: standardization, control, and surveillance. Today we explore how socialism tried to reshape urban life and how its urban experiments still shape skylines today. Long before Lenin and Mao, socialists imagined new forms of collective living. In the early 1800s, Charles Fourier dreamed of the Phalanstère, a massive communal palace where 1,600 people would live and work together. His designs included shared dining halls, workshops, and gardens. Every detail was meant to align personal happiness with collective good. Meanwhile, Robert Owen built New Lanark in Scotland, a mill town where workers had housing, schools, and medical care. Though paternalistic, it showed how industrial settlements could be organized with social welfare in mind. These utopians never built entire cities, but they seeded an idea. Space could be used to mold society, and socialism would soon take that idea into a massive scale. The Soviet Union was the great laboratory of the socialist urbanism. In the 1920s, after the Russian Revolution, architects debated what a socialist city should look like. Some argued for this urbanism, scattering industry and housing into linear settlements. Others proposed communal houses where families would give up private kitchens and live collectively. But by the 1930s, under Stalin, the vision shifted. The state turned to monumentality. Moscow's general plan of 1935 envisioned grand boulevards, vast squares, and monumental buildings. The Moscow Metro, opened in 1935, wasn't just infrastructure. It was a palace for the people, with chandeliers and mosaics celebrating socialist triumph. In the same time, Stalin ordered the construction of the Seven Sisters, massive skyscrapers blending Soviet symbolism with American scale. These towers broadcast power, their Gothic spires visible for miles. By the 1950s, however, the USSR faced a housing crisis. The solution was Microrayon, standardized housing districts of prefabricated apartment blocks, each with schools, clinics, and shops within walking distance. Cheap, fast, and functional, they housed millions across the USSR and its satellite states. The microrayon was socialism's most lasting urban form. Mass housing close to services designed to embody equality, but critics called it monotonous and soulless. Equality achieved at the expense of individuality. Socialist planning spread across Eastern Europe after World War II. In Warsaw, almost 85% of the city was destroyed. Under socialism, it was rebuilt as a both capital and a symbol of resilience. The old town was reconstructed in historical style, but elsewhere, monumental avenues and socialist realist architecture dominated. In East Berlin, the showcase was Stanley, or now Karl Marx Alley, a grand boulevard lined with monumental housing blocks in ornate wedding cake style. The wide avenue wasn't just housing, it was a stage for parades built to impress the West and embody socialist strength. By the 1960s, however, Eastern Europe shifted to prefabricated modernism. Panelax in Czechoslovakia, Plattenbau in East Germany, Blokowisko in Poland. Different names, same formula. Standardized housing blocks, cheap and fast to build. These blocks were criticized for monotony, yet they delivered what capitalist cities often didn't: universal, affordable housing. In China, Socialist urbanism took its own form. Under Mao, cities were organized around the Danwei or work unit. Each Danwei compound was a self-contained ward. Factory, dormitories, cafeteria, clinic, even a kindergarten. Housing was tied to employment and life revolved around collective institutions. The Danwei wasn't just urban design, it was social control. The state could allocate housing, food, and even marriage permissions through the work unit, but it also guaranteed security. Every worker had housing, medical care, and access to education. In Beijing, massive boulevards were laid out around Tiananmen Square. Mao wanted the city to embody socialist order with monumental avenues for praise and a monumental square for collective gatherings. China's cities bore the imprint of socialist collectivism, but also of centralized authority. After 1959, Cuba became the socialism flagship in the Americas. In Havana, planners developed Revolution Square, a vast open space for mass rallies overlooked by the Jose Marti Memorial. This wasn't the European plaza, it was a stage for collective mobilization. Cuba also attempted radical housing solutions. The Plan Cayo Hueso in Havana experimented with integrated housing blocks, schools, and clinics. But limited resources, US embargo, and economic struggles meant many projects stalled or remained incomplete. Elsewhere in Latin America, socialist movements attempted urban reforms. In Nicaragua, the Sandinistas redesigned Managua after the 1972 earthquake to emphasize public spaces and collective housing. These efforts showed socialism's global appeal, but also its economic limits outside great power backing. Like and subscribe, because once you have seen how socialism reshaped cities, you'll want to see how fascism tried to outdo it, not with equality, but with spectacle and fear. If Moscow was socialism's monumental capital, Pyongyang became its most theatrical. After the Korean War leveled the city, North Korea rebuilt Pyongyang as a showcase of Juche, which is its homegrown socialist ideology. Wide boulevards led to enormous squares, perfect for parades. Monumental towers and grand statues dominated sidelines. Housing blocks filled the spaces between, regimented but well serviced. Pyongyang was less a living city than a stage, built for mass choreography where citizens became part of the spectacle. It epitomized socialism's urban ambition, equality but also obedience encoded into streets and plazas. Socialism wasn't just a Soviet or Asian phenomenon. Around the world, other nations tried their own urban experiments. In Tanzania, Julius Nyerere launched Ujamaa villages in the 1960s. Collectivized rural settlements meant to provide services, schools, and shared agriculture. Though often resisted and poorly resourced, they reflected socialism's belief in recognizing a space for equality. In Yugoslavia, socialism took a unique turn with self-management. Cities like New Belgrade featured massive housing estates, but planning allowed more local input. Worker councils had some say over their districts. The result was socialist modernism with a slightly softer edge. In Vietnam, after independence, Hanoi was reshaped by Soviet-style apartment blocks and broad boulevards. Housing was allocated by the state, reinforcing equality but also standardization. These cases shows that socialist cities weren't uniform copies. Each region adapted socialist urbanism to its own conditions. What was it like to actually live in these cities? Strength. Universal housing meant no one was homeless. Services like schools and clinics were built into neighborhoods. Public transport was prioritized, keeping cities accessible. Open spaces and playgrounds were common, especially in microrayons. Weaknesses. Apartments were often small and standardized. Waiting lists for housing could be long. Architecture could feel monotonous and lifeless. The same spaces that promised equality also enabled surveillance and control. For many, life in socialist cities was defined by security, but also by constraints. Across continents, socialist urbanism followed recognizable patterns. First, monumentality, grand squares and boulevards for parades. Second, mass housing, prefabricated blocks or Danwei apartments. Third, integration, Services like schools and clinics built into neighborhoods. Fourth, control. Space used to monitor and mobilize populations. The socialist city tried to embody equality in concrete. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it built conformity instead. Today, the legacy of socialist planning is everywhere. In Eastern Europe, socialist housing blocks still dominate the skylines. Once stigmatized, many are being renovated, providing affordable homes in cities struggling with capitalist housing crisis. In China, the Danwei system has faded, but its influence remains in Beijing's spatial layout. In Cuba, socialist plazas still stage rallies. In Pyongyang, the monumental axis still defines the city. Even in the West, planners now re-examine socialist ideas like walkability, integrated services, and universal housing as solutions to 21st century urban crisis. The socialist cities may not have achieved utopia, but its lessons still matter. Socialism wasn't the only 20th century ideology reshaping city. Another darker version took root: fascism, where socialism built for equality, fascism built for domination and myth. Monumental avenues, colossal squares, and grand parades became tools for authoritarian theater. Next time in episode 5 of How Ideology Shapes Cities, we enter the world of fascist cities, the theater of power.